Hey team, this is going to be our lab for Friday, November 15th. So this is going to be the last actual lab class that we have this semester. So it's probably going to be a relatively difficult one for the students because it's going to do things that we haven't done before, and it's going to deal with a macro that we don't record but we actually put into this workbook. So we're going to put it in from the developer tab, from the back end, from the macro side, from the VBA side of Excel. So it might be a little challenging for you even, and if you have problems, I want you to just let me know. So hopefully you'll have enough time to go over this a couple of times before you teach this lab on Friday, because again, it's going to be difficult. Now, I'm going to be there, and if you need help, I will of course help you, but what I want you to make clear to the students is I have given them ample time to have this complete. So when they submit this file, not having had class today on Wednesday, it is a requirement that their file be complete. So if they don't submit a macro enabled file and it doesn't do all of these things, they're not going to get credit. So it's not going to end up having to look exactly like mine because they could have done it a variety of different ways, but they do have to have all of the pieces that are involved here, and we can talk more about that as we grade. Having said that, hopefully you've watched the video that I posted for the students. If you haven't, it's under helpful hints on Canvas for them so that you know where they should be when they walk into your class. I'll go ahead and show you where they should be. This tab should be completely filled out. You did that last week based on that regions. Their fantasy winner should be complete up until this point. Now, what I mean by that is they should have these drop-down boxes that allow them to select wide receivers and tight ends and whoever else. They should have projected points here. It is likely that they currently have some of these hashtag NAs. Part of what you're going to go over is going to be how to get rid of those and what they are and how we're going to protect against them. So part of what we're going to be talking about is being able to get rid of those NAs. So it's possible that they don't have it. I'm going to delete that button because I'm going to show you how to get it there. They won't have that yet. But they will have all of these drop-down boxes and should have these projected points drag in. They also, in order to get these player names on here, if they don't have them in alphabetical order, I'm not really a stickler for it. It's really kind of okay. But the way that I got them in that order is I have a tab called Player Names where I have sorted these, deleted the duplicates, and sorted them in alphabetical order. I have 2017 data and 2018 data, which you know, and I have calculated the average points per game. So what I've done here is there's a VLOOKUP for each individual player for the 2017 points and the 2018 fantasy points, two VLOOKUPs to get the exact match. So you'll notice the first one that comes up with an NA going down through here is Blair Walsh. He apparently was in the data for 2017, was not in the data for 2018, so he has an NA. So when I go over and I do my average function, because I'm looking for the average of these 2 years, if a player has 2 years, I get some numbers, and then I get an NA for Blair Walsh. So I get an NA because average can't capture that. It can't capture an average for this particular thing. Now, there are a million ways to correct this error, and I'm going to show you one. If you come up with a different one that you like better, that you want to teach, that's fine. I don't care. There are a million ways to do this, but I'm going to use a new formula. So I'm going to create a new column here, and I'm going to call this 2017 points adjusted. And I'm going to call it adjusted because it's adjusted for error, and I'll go ahead and put that in here so that you know what I mean when I say adjusted. I'm adjusting it for the error. So in order to adjust for the error, I'm going to use a formula we haven't used yet. I have talked about it. It is in their slide deck, but we haven't actually used it yet. It's called IfError. And I'm going to use the IfError, not formula, function. And I'm going to use the IfError. So what the IfError function does is it looks at a value and says, if that's an error, what do you want me to do with it? So it's going to look right here, because we're doing 2017 points. I'm going to look at 2017 points. That's going to be my value. And if that's an error, I want you to return 0. So if that doesn't exist, I want you to return 0 for that particular player. So if error b2 0, then I can just copy that formula all the way down, and we don't really notice anything immediately. We're going to do the same thing for 2018 points adjusted. And again, we're going to adjust these for the error. So we're going to do the same formula here again, function, sorry. If error, I'm tired, y'all can tell. So look at the 2018 points, and if there's an error, give me a 0. So here in this column, when we see Blair Walsh, we should get a 0 for his 2018 points, and that's lovely. And we do. So we'll notice, and we would notice in the 2017 data, if we scroll down here, we would notice that we'd gotten a whole bunch of zeros, but I just didn't want to scroll that far. Now I have two columns, and there are zeros in these columns if these players didn't play in a particular year. So that's great. But if they haven't played in both years, I just want to return the value of the year that they did play. So if they played both years, I want an average. If they only played 1 year, I want just that value to show up. So again, that's a logical construct. That is something that you would have to think about, and I want you to challenge your students to think about that. I have challenged them already. They should have already attempted to figure this out, but they probably haven't. So give them a couple minutes to brainstorm what you could possibly do. They know all of the stuff that needs to go in here in order for me to be able to do this function. After you give them just a couple minutes to brainstorm, because this is going to take long enough as it is to think about what you could do, see if they can come up with any of this. This is what I would do. Again, there's a lot of things that you could do, but I'm going to call this adjusted averages. Averages. And this is how my brain works. So I'm going to do a nested if statement. And I'm going to say if one of these two things is true. If or. So if the 2017 adjusted points equals 0, or the 2018 adjusted points equal 0. If either one of those things are true, what do I want my value to be? Well, if either one of these adjusted points give us back a 0, I want you to return the max value for those two. So if I get a 0 in one, I want the other value. I want you to return the value that's not 0. I want the maximum value for that field. If both of those things are false, if neither one of them are an error, I want an average of the two fields. So if there's not an error, I want an average of these two fields. And if there is an error, I want the other value. So if either E2 or F2 are 0, so if one of those is true, if one of them originally was an error, give me the maximum value, so give me the other value. If both of those, if neither one of them are 0, if both of those are false, give me the average of the two values. Hopefully that makes sense. You're going to have to walk them through that step by step, so make sure you understand what's happening. So you'll notice if I look at Greg Zerline, his average is 10.9. I see it down here. The average here is 10.9. You'll notice down here Blair Walsh originally had an error. He now has a 0. It has instead returned the max value. So that's going to take care of all of those NAs and actually give us the average that we wanted. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to highlight these in a different color so that we know that this is data that we have done for this lab. Again, the student should already have something that looks like this. If they don't have something that looks like this, these are simple VLOOKUPs from the list of players where the duplicates have been removed, but they should already have something that they can make work like this. So again, here we go with the fantasy football situation, but these are what we have adjusted so that we can put them over here and not get these NA values on this fantasy winner worksheet. So you can see, even though I have fixed the data over here on the player points per game, or player points per game, doesn't fix it over here. So let's look at what I've done. Over here I say if D6 is empty, so it has two quotes next to it, please select player. They don't have to do this, right? They are not required to have put this in here. But what this does is if this is blank, it says please select player. They don't have to have that, right? But they do have to have the drop-down box to be able to select player. But basically they have a VLOOKUP that says look at D6, go to the player points per game in this range and return column 4. All I want you to do is change column 4 to column 7, because that's what we did over there is we adjusted column 4 to column 7. Now you can copy these and paste them, if I can get my thing to paste. Copy and paste them in these other cells because they're all absolute reference the way that I have written them. They're all absolute reference, so you can just copy and paste. Hopefully yours are absolute reference as well. Now, when you get over here, you want these to, of course, be green because that other thing is, that other side over there is green, and that looks funny. But that's how you fix those NAs. So now all of those players, regardless of who you select, will come up with actual numbers. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put a button in here, put a macro in here that tells us which team wins. So in order to do that, we have to come up with a solution, right? And I think somewhere down here it says that we should conditionally format to show if any bench players should be started instead of the current week. So let's see. Let's do conditional formatting, and let's say conditionally format, new rule, and we'll say classic, and we'll say use a formula. And I want you to highlight this if this is greater than the max value of these. Highlight if it's greater than the max value of those. All it's going to do is highlight this cell if it is greater than the max value. How about minimum value? The minimum value from any one of that. So it's going to say if that is true, if this is in fact bigger than something that we want, we're going to select it. So we'll just say okay. So this tells us that one of these players, this player has a higher average than one of these players, and we can look up there and take care of that. So we can do the same thing and apply that conditional formatting rule. So we can do manage rules, and we're going to say, let's see, can we copy it? Add a new rule. Okay, we're just going to do it again. So we'll just run through it really fast, all 4 times. There's probably an easier way to do it, but my brain isn't working, so I'm just going to run through it 4 times. So we're going to say new rule and classic and use a formula, and we're going to say if this cell is greater than the minimum of these cells, and again, we did not include the kicker because the kicker is not included there. So if it's greater than the minimum, let's make it yellow. I just like yellow. Again, it's one of the only colors I can see. So both of these players need to be swapped out. Do the same thing here relatively quickly. Let's see if we can do both of them at once. I don't know if we can. Let's see. Told you, my brain isn't really my friend today, but that's okay. Y'all bear with me. Let's see. So if this one, and we don't want it to freeze in row 15, but we do want it to freeze in the column, is greater than the minimum of these cells. So that logically makes sense. Let's see if it works. Fill, yellow. Okay. Okay. So both of these are greater than the minimum. Well, let's change the minimum to be higher. I have no idea who's going to be higher. Looks like I need to change Willie Sneed. I'm just double checking my work to see if that works. So that one's not greater than the minimum anymore. This one's still greater than the minimum. Let's get rid of Aaron Rodgers. Again, we're just trying to check our work. It'd be nice if we went through the process and like highlighted ones that these up here that were smaller, but we're not going into that detail. But that tells us if we should put our bench players in, what's happening. So that worked. So we can see that logically works out. So that's good. So we can do both of them at one time. So you only have to do it twice. Okay, so moving on. We're going to insert a button. And I've showed the students how they can go and they can insert a shape and make it into a button. This time we're going to go to the Developer tab and we are going to choose a button. Now, if you're doing this on a PC, you do insert form control, but here button is on our little thing. So we're going to click on button and we're going to say, I don't want to do any of this. I just want to create a button. So here on my button, I'm going to delete, if it let me, this text, and I'm going to say press for winner. I can spend a lot of time if I want to making this button pretty. Really, I just want it to say press for winner. And here we're going to push this button in a minute to figure out which one of these teams wins. Well, the first thing that you have to do is calculate the total score. So here we're going to calculate total score for this team. And we're going to do a sum function of the players that are actually in the game. So we have to create this sum function. We're going to do that, and we're going to take this sum function. Oh, my PC misses me. Okay, enter. We're going to copy, and we're going to paste this right over here. So we have total score, and we have total score in F19 and in N19, and that's great. But we want to be able to press this button and for it to come up, and we're going to make it create a pop-up box. You know how sometimes you get a pop-up box when you're going to have an error message? We're going to tell Excel that I want a pop-up box when I push this button that tells me who the winner is. So in order to do that, it's not as easy as you might think. We're actually going to work from the VBA side of Excel. I've provided you with another file that I would like for you to look at. It is a text file, and I'll send it to you in your email, but it also will be in the student's lab file. So it's a text file. It's called Fantasy Macro Text. When you take a look at this, it's called a sub because it's a sub programming. But anyway, it's called Who Wins. So it goes through a whole bunch of stuff and says team 1 here, team 2 here. And it's going to say team 1 will prevail, team 2 will prevail. Well, let's take a look at this. And we have team A and team B. So we'll work on this a little bit when we get in here. But we're basically going to take this text file and we're going to paste it in and make it a macro. So we're going to click on this Visual Basic button up here on our Developer tab, and we're going to open this Visual Basic editor. Now, my computer's going to spin for a minute, but eventually it's going to open. So what we're going to do, we're going to go up here and see this is our practice lab. We're going to click inside this Fantasy Winner worksheet. We're going to double click. When you double click, you're going to get this Chapter 8 practice lab ready for Sheet 5 code. Then I want you to find the text editor file. I want you to copy all of this data. Just copy it. And in this editor, I want you to paste it. So now you have sub, who wins, all of this stuff that you don't have to understand. It's declare in memory and such things, and I can explain it to any students who want to talk about it. But it's basically code that I have written that you can just paste in here to make your macro work the way you want it to. So we've taught them how to record macros. This one they're just going to paste and they're going to get it from me. The whole purpose of this is not for them to learn to write a macro, but I want them to know that they can go out on the internet, they can search for a macro, and then they have the ability to edit it. So it's very important that they understand they can edit inside of here. So that is what I'm trying to get across. So now we're back in this Visual Basic editor. We can just close it out. And we're going to say, VB projects must be saved in macro-enabled workbooks. So we want to save this as a macro-enabled workbook. So we're going to call it this XLSM file and say, okay. That might happen to some of you when you put this macro in here. So this macro has it. You just save it as that. So we're going to right-click on here, and we're going to assign this a macro. And this macro is going to be who wins. And we're going to assign it. Now we're going to press this button. Now when we press this button, this week ends in a tie. Ties are like kissing your sister. This is a message box. And this message box says that this week's matchup ends in a tie. This week's matchup does not end in a tie. You can see that Team A over here and Team B are not the same. Like you can see currently that Team B is going to win. But our macro says this week ends in a tie. It doesn't end in a tie. So that means I've got to edit my macro. So what I recommend that you do is have your students, if they have great memories, that's fine. But if they don't, have them write down, and I'm going to write down, you can't see me, but I'm going to write it down, what cells these things are in. So Team A, their total score is in F19. So I can see Team A's total score right here in F19. I can see Team B's total score over here in N19. So I want you to remember that. We're going to go back to the Visual Basic editor, and it says Team 1, J18. Well, it's not J18. It's F 19. Now, if the student's having a different spot than you do, their spot is different, which is why I said you should have them write it down. Yours could be different than mine, but the point is you can edit these ranges to be what you want them to be. So I have F19 and N19 because that's what happens on my worksheet. While I'm back here, I'm also going to change this from Team 1 to Team A and from Team 2 to Team B. And you'll notice because these are in parentheses, or not parentheses, quotation marks, this is what was displayed on my thing. This weekend's in a tie. Ties are like kissing your sister. That's what will happen if it's an actual tie. So close that editor and I'm going to push the button again. Team B will prevail. Team B does in fact prevail in this instance. So now my macro is going to work like that. I just want you to let them experience what it's like to change a macro and put a macro in. Again, the point is they can go off the internet and get macros for just about anything they want, and that's how you put them in and how you would edit them. Now, macros get wicked complicated. We're only dealing with basic ones in this class. So you can look on this macros list now and see how many macros I have in all open workbooks. In this workbook, I only have one macro that's important. They're going to need to know how to count the macros in a workbook, but that's how I would know. The last thing I want you to show them is this. I want to hide this. So I want to hide these, and I don't want to hide the row necessarily. I guess I could hide the row because if I just right click and hide the row, that gets rid of that, and I can still press it for the winner, and it says Team B will prevail. I guess that's adequate. I was just going to make the text white and hide it, but that's fine. We can just hide it because we don't want the obvious thing to happen. We don't want to be able to tell who wins just by looking, so we need to push the button. So we can just hide it so we know. We also could color the text white or put it somewhere else. It would be fine. We could also sum it up in the macro, but we're not getting that fancy. So the last thing I want you to show them is this. I want you to go to the page layout tab, and I want you to show them how to make a background. And I want to make a background. And on my Mac, it doesn't look like I'm going to get the option to go out and search for it. Show all picture files. Show all files. So if, let's see. Never mind. Let's see here. So we're going to go out to the internet. And for those of you working on a Mac, you're probably going to want to do this. So I'm going to show you what to do here. Maybe if I can make it come out. So go out to Google Chrome or whatever and search fantasy football. And I just want images for fantasy football. So search images, and I'm just going to grab one. Doesn't make any difference what it is. I just want an image. So I'm going to click on this one. I'm going to go save image as, and I'm just going to drop it on my desktop as fantasy. Probably fantasy football. And just drop it on my desktop. And I'm just going to click save. So you're probably going to have to show them how to do that, how to go out to Google and grab that image. Because on my Mac, it doesn't give me the option. On my PC, I get the option to search in Bing right there on my machine, but I don't get that option here. So you're going to have to go out to the internet and grab it. So then when I search background and it's asking me to select a picture, I go to my desktop and click that, and voila. I can put something in the background of my image. It's really easy, right? They could do this for their pilot project. They can do a lot of things. One thing that you will notice, if I see this, I probably want to uncheck the View Grid Lines button because that all of a sudden makes it not as fun to look at. So again, that's the things that I want you to cover. Hopefully that makes sense. If you have questions, please let me know. But again, please watch their videos so you know where they are. Please walk them through this and know that I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about the final exam. Okay, great. Thanks.